Today we are speaking with Kevork Almassian, an award-winning journalist, geopolitical analyst, and the host of an independent political commentary channel, Syriana Analysis. He joins me today in dissecting the most recent events unfolding in Syria after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode on TMJ Podcast. I'm your guest host, Hassan Shami. Thank you, Kevork, for joining me on TMJ News. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you. Thank you, Harvey, for having me.
You know, there's a lot of things unfolding right now in Syria, and you're the right man to talk to. I've been watching you for years, and your channel, Syriana Analysis, has given a lot of amazing information out there on YouTube and on your Twitter and Instagram. So you're the right guy to talk to about the most recent events unfolding in Syria. And I want to get straight to it with Sednaya prisons. This is something that's coming out the last 2 days, especially on Twitter. We see it all over the place. And with these prisons, you know, after doing some research and talking to many pro-Bashar and anti-Bashar people in Syria, I found that within the prison system, specifically this prison, there's a lot of secret intelligence that some were claiming even the higher ups of the government may not know about. What can you talk about these prisons? How bad is it? And how much of the government actually knew about what was going on?
So this is a very good topic to start with, because I believe whether you were, let's say, pro-government or anti-government, there was no way for any sane person, any person with minimum humanity in him or her, to support such a prison system if they knew all the details about this prison. So there were major accusations against Syria that it has a prison system in Sednaya for political prisoners, and there are tortures going on in this prison. The government came and defended itself and said that those allegations are wild and it can't be, and there are regular visits being paid by Syrian officials to this prison. Now, I believe this was in 2015 or 16, the Amnesty International published a major research about Saydnaya, and they made, again, wild allegations about the execution of between 5,000 to 13,000 Syrians. And I went through the report, and unfortunately speaking, the methodology of the research was mostly based on interviews with unknown activists and unknown eyewitnesses in Turkey and in Jordan. Therefore, any type of research that is not based on solid evidence, you cannot really take it as granted. So this research has been also criticized by journalists, investigative journalists, because it didn't meet the highest criteria. However, now that the government is gone, you can see that the media has an access, and the insurgents or the militants from the different factions have an access to the prison, and they have published the footage from the prison showing how far the prison has gone in terms of its mistreatment, let's say, of the prisoners. Especially when it comes, look, the Sednaya prison is divided into two. One part is for criminals, basically, and serious crimes, like we're talking about killings and rapings, and therefore I don't really have particularly sympathy and empathy towards this type of people. But it's also mentioned that there were political prisoners on the other side of the Saydnaya prison. And if anyone was detained based on his or her political opinion and being tortured, this is a crime. It's a big crime. And especially with the conditions that we've seen in these prisons, basically some of them were under the ground, and the ventilator systems were really bad, and the nutrition and the basic, let's say, human rights that these prisoners should enjoy were not really preserved and respected by whoever is managing this. Now, some people say, was the government aware or not? I was thinking about this yesterday, and I told myself there were many accusations about the Sednaya prison to the government. And the former president of Syria, Assad, himself was asked about this prison multiple times during the interviews with foreign press. So I would assume, or I would say, if I was the president of Syria and I'm receiving all these reports, at least I should have gone to the prison and checked what's going on there. and it's impossible to hide the structures, if they are torture chambers, for example, etc. It's impossible to hide. Even if the president comes in a declared visit, you cannot hide these rooms. You cannot completely deconstruct the prison system. So now that the people who were also pro-government, let's say, are watching these scenes, they all feel guilty and say that, yes, we sided with the army for the sovereignty of Syria, for its territorial integrity, and we wanted to be a stronger country in the region in the axis of resistance. Those are the reasons we supported the government and Assad. But we are in no way or shape were supportive of such tortures, especially that most of them were Syrians, regardless of if they are Islamists, not Islamists. It's irrelevant. So even if you capture an ISIS, let's say, cell or a militant, I think there should be a legal procedure, a court decision, and in Syria, it's legal to execute. So if you have committed a terrorist act and you bombed, let's say, a school bus or a restaurant or slaughtered someone, you could receive a death penalty legally and you perish, basically, right? But torturing in this way is unacceptable. And it's, for me, it's just, especially that we learned that there were some Lebanese from the days of the civil war of Lebanon. Those are all unacceptable. Nobody stood with Assad because he was running, let's say, prison like this. Everybody who stood with him, they stood because they knew that he represents the symbol for Syria's unity, territorial integrity, and also this geopolitical struggle of power in the region. And now that he left the country and he escaped, I mean, even these slogans that he raised, that he is going to protect the country, I think he betrayed his own slogans and his own, at least, promises to the Syrian people. And he left in the worst shape possible in front of his army, who fought for him for 14, 15 years, in front of the people who believed in him, who supported him, who sacrificed, who lived under dire conditions after the sanctions for the sake of a better outcome. But leaving the country this way, it's unforgivable.
As I spoke to many people, they gave me examples of the CIA has some investigations and has conducted some operations that the federal government doesn't know about. And they're just giving us examples. But like you said, there's no excuse. There's no way to justify any type of torture, even for those, like you said, an ISIS member beheads or blows up a school bus. There's a legal way of executing the man in prison, right? So this
Yes.
idea of torture, absolutely, there's no way that anybody can justify this. And like you mentioned, the president and the government was asked about this by foreign press, and they said, no, this is not true. So they're obviously were aware. And if they did not go check, now, Kevork,
Also, we have to tell these people also, two wrongs don't make it correct. If the CIA is torturing people in Guantanamo or in our region in different prisons, we have been harsh critics of this. But I cannot find myself in, let's say, in a political position which my position would be considered supportive for the Syrian army, whereas the chief of the Syrian army, former President Assad, he didn't go and check on these prisons. I think that is there. Like I cannot find myself. I cannot find any excuse for me. If I was a 10th grade official in Syria, I would have wanted to at least go and check what's happening there after all these reports, right? And now the people have seen it, and I think there is no way to hide it any longer from the public.
No, absolutely. And I guess the point of saying that the CIA has conducted some operations the government doesn't know about is because I was actually questioning, well, how did they know?
Yes.
This is the government. They're saying, well, they're giving other examples. Now, some people in Syria see Bashar as a symbol that is against foreign intervention and the fragmentation of Syria. And others see him as a dictator, a brutal dictator. How do you personally see Bashar, and what does a Syria without Bashar al-Assad look like?
So I argued from the beginning that this is a foreign-backed insurgency. And whether they have legitimate demands or not, that doesn't change the fact that they are foreign-backed insurgency. Their funding, their weapons, their training, logistics, intelligence, all come from regional and international intelligence. And also because my position was clear on what's happening in the region. For example, American occupation of Iraq, the occupation of Palestine, the invasions of Lebanon, and different countries in the region. I don't find myself at all in any camp that the Americans are leading. It's impossible for me to believe that the US is on the right side. And I don't think that the Americans were interested in bringing human rights and democracy based on the previous experiences. Therefore, I sided with the Syrian army against this foreign-backed insurgency because I believed that this insurgency is foreign-backed, and if they succeed, they will bring a foreign agenda to the country. And now that Assad is gone, you see that what I was telling for the people turned out to be correct. Whether you have a problem with the government or not doesn't change the fact that you shouldn't receive foreign funding and foreign support from imperialist powers, because then they will come and colonize your country and partition the cake. And this is what's happening now at the current moment in Syria. So Assad took the responsibility and he fought against this foreign insurgency. And I said back then, if Assad fled the country in 2011 or 2012 and took these offers to leave, I would have called him a traitor. And now, again, I say what he did is treasonous because he didn't respect his constitutional responsibilities and duties to protect Syria from foreign intervention. Let's suppose that the attack on Aleppo happened and the army was overwhelmed and you had to retreat and let's say, reposition in Hama. And the army said, this is our red line and we're not going to allow the militants to move further south. And at this time, he fled or he flew to Moscow and he met with President Putin. And probably he was told something there that there is a ready deal and it's cooked and you have to accept it. There is no way that you cannot accept. And maybe Syria found itself in a position that this deal is above its size, political size, let's say, and they cannot reject it. Perfect. You come to your public, you tell them that this is the deal. I'm going to accept, for example, under the Astana Accords, that opposition will have its participation in the government. There's going to be constitutional changes, early elections, and I will give up my political authorities to the prime minister, and he leads this transitional period until new elections, and then I leave because my presence is like controversial and I'm a divisive figure. And Americans aren't lifting the sanctions because I exist. Like this would have at least kept his respect for the people, for the people who loved him or sacrificed and paid heavy price from their sons and the fathers and mothers and cousins in the Syrian army. They would have respected him more because he would have told them, look, this is going to be all right. Don't worry. Those are the guarantors. Those are the allies, and they will lead this transitional period. And the militants are not going to exterminate, for example, certain religious minorities, because this is the biggest fear, and they are doing it at the current moment against the Alawites in Latakia. And then if he left after that 6 months, at least he would have kept his reputation among the people who trusted him, that he is the symbol of unity, because he was. Up until the moment he left the country, he left in the middle of the night. The Turks are now, Turkey and Israel are the ones managing the affairs in Syria. Let's be very honest with the people. Turkey is leading the forces of HTS. And in the south, in Quneitira, Israel is occupying further territories and sealing the borders with Lebanon. And you rest assured, the territory that Israel occupies, they will never, ever return these territories. Forget about them. And they will conquer it, they will capture it, and then they will annex it to Israel. They will say for security reasons, buffer zone, because HTS is a terrorist organization. Now we have to protect ourselves, of course. Wink, wink, wink. Those were the same militants that Israel used to receive and give them medical treatment, but now they will consider them terrorists because this is how they do. So my opinion is, from in the north, this is going to be Aleppo, Idlib, Homs, a sphere of influence of Turkey. Latakia, Tartus, the coast, will be a sphere of influence of Russia. In the south, Damascus and Daraa are going to be a sphere of influence of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Jordan. And Sueda, which is Druze populated, it will be sphere of influence of Israel. And probably they will open some route between Jordan and the Golan Heights for the Druze to move freely between Syria and the Golan Heights, because Golan is also populated by the Druze. And the Kurds will also have their piece of cake. The Americans will continue protecting them. And Iranians are out completely. Iranians forget about it. They don't have anything left in Syria. The entire project of the axis of resistance, which started 2-3 decades ago, is gone. And especially in Syria, they have like almost like the only two things they asked HDS through Qatar, that they want to preserve their Shia shrines and they want to keep their embassy. That's it. Other than that, they have nothing left in Syria.
So you mentioned something here that, you know, the militants were being backed and supported by Israel, right? And now Israel's saying we got to create a buffer zone. And you spent the past decade exposing the CIA backing of al-Nusra. And al-Nusra's leader at the time, or still is Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, who is now the Syrian rebel who is being paraded around as the leader of Syria with the events that had unfolded. Who is Abu Mohammed al-Jolani? And what is his role? And what is his role in the events that have just unfolded in Syria?
We cannot speak about Abu Muhammad al-Jolani without speaking about Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda is and has always been a contract army for the US deep state, for the CIA, at least starting from Afghanistan. There were some minor blowbacks. They consider these blowbacks as collateral damage against the US interests. But other than that, major wars conducted by Al-Qaeda and other radical Salafism and Takfiri jihadism were mostly targeted at the competitors of the US. It started in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union, in Chechnya, in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq. In Iraq, I just want to mention where Abu Muhammad al-Jolani was fighting. This was in 2004 and 5, when the Iraqi resistance was conducting major operations against the US occupation. The Americans revived these Al-Qaeda cells in Iraq in order to increase the sectarianism and create a rift in the society. It's a typical divide and conquer. When you support the Al-Qaeda through the Saudi intelligence, the Al-Qaeda will start bombing the Shias in their mosques, in their shrines, so they create sectarian tension. So now the Shias are no longer fighting against the US, they're fighting against Al-Qaeda. And this is the same strategy, which was the reason why the Muslim Brotherhood existed to begin with in the 1920s, when the Brits were still the empire back then, and they basically helped the creation of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt in order to find a rift in the Egyptian society, which was resisting the occupation of their country. So back then, the nationalists and the socialist left-wingers were doing the resistance. And in order to find a foe for these groups, you create a Muslim Brotherhood, which is naturally against socialism, against national state, and against nationalism of Egypt, for example. And they started fighting against each other. And the peak of it was under the leadership of Jamal Abdel Nasser, who was a pan-Arabist, and the Muslim Brotherhood was trying to find, to create destabilization in his country. And the same thing was in Syria. In Iraq, this Jolani was there. He fought against a sectarian war, let's say, under the banner of fighting against the occupation. And then he was in American prison. He was groomed there, basically. And they moved him later to Syria. And in Syria, he was the founder of the Al-Qaeda offshoot, Al-Nusra Fund. And basically, he was the guy representing Ayman al-Zawahiri in Syria. And under his rule in Idlib, Syria has, of course, with the direct support of the US, the CIA gave him all sorts of weapons, including anti-tank rockets against the Syrian army. And that's how they occupied Idlib in 2015. So Jolani was considered, according to the former U.S. envoy to Syria, James Jeffrey, an asset. I'm quoting him, an asset for the U.S. strategy in Syria. So this is their guy. It's a bad guy, but it's our bad guy. This is how they see it in the U.S. And that is why when this Nusra occupied the borders between the Golan Heights and Syria, when they were injured, they used to go to the Israeli field hospitals and receive medical treatment. And Israel gave them cash and weapons and gave them medical treatment. And when the former head of Mossad was asked by the Al Jazeera in 2017, 18, I believe, by Mahdi Hassan, and he agreed that Israel gave this medical treatment to al-Nusra, which is an offshoot of al-Qaeda. And he said, because according to my memory, al-Qaeda never attacked Israel. So that's why we give them medical treatment for humanitarian support. But then when he was asked, what about Hezbollah? Would you give them a medical support? He says, no, we don't give them medical support because Hezbollah has done acts of hostilities against Israel, unlike al-Qaeda. So the question here is why al-Qaeda doesn't attack Israel. And I'm not calling for it. So for the people watching this and thinking like I truly hate, despise all these terrorist groups. And if they're going to attack Israel and liberate it, between quotations, they're not going to liberate it. They're going to occupy it and turn it into another version of Israel, but the so-called Islamic version this time. So no way I want them to go anywhere close to Israel, but it's a legitimate question to ask. Why don't they attack Israel? Now Israel is occupying territories inside Syria, occupying the hills, and they're going to, the Israelis are already celebrating like, oh, we already conquered Syrian land. Those are beautiful hills full of snow. We're going to create skis resorts, they say there. So this is how they see our countries. It's just devs, like they can move inside, they can occupy anything they want, they can establish anything they want. They don't give two Fs about international law because there is none, basically. And now what stops Israel from expansion? Who's going to fight them? HTS? Who is this person with two functioning brain cells who believe that HTS first is going to fight against Israel? And secondly, how, even if they want to, Israel already obliterated all Syria's strategic weaponry, air defenses, the marine, the
Navy,
the ports, navy. Sorry, yes. So Syria is like it's like castrated. It's like a castration of Syria. No political or military strength any longer. It's going to be the end of Syria as we know it.
Now, with all this being said, everything that you mentioned about these states being formed and the Islamic groups taking over and Israel taking more land and occupying more land, well, that's what the axis of resistance was for, right? The axis of resistance, people say, is to protect the region from this occurrence. And moments ago, you said that this is the end of the axis of resistance. Are you saying this is the end of the axis of resistance in Syria or the axis of resistance as a whole?
My friend, the axis of resistance is a network of alliances. And when you have to struggle, to wage a war of struggle against Israel, whether politically or militarily, especially militarily, first of all, you need to have members of this axis of resistance which agree on one project. And I don't think that Hamas agrees with Hezbollah and with Iran and with Syria. We have to be honest with our people. The Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood group, and they have taken a bold decision in 2011 and 2012 to leave Syria and be part of the axis of Qatar and Turkey. And therefore, they have already picked and chosen what paths do they want politically.
But
Now,
the change was years later, right?
No, in 2012 they left Syria, and this was a choice they made. Nobody forced them to take this decision. They made this decision that they will go to Turkey and to Qatar. after decades of staying basically in Syria. So now Hamas says that they are celebrating the regime change in Syria. So first things first, if Hamas, which is part of the axis of resistance, is basically celebrating the regime change in Syria and installing a pro-American or pro-Turkish or pro-Qatari government, then you don't have loyal, at least, ally in your axis of resistance.
Well,
And
Kevork, allow me to say this real quick. For instance, what if Hamas, this is just an observation, what if Hamas is accepting the new realities and is trying to keep, because with that statement, they asked for the support for Hamas. What if they're just accepting the new realities and during this war against Israel, they still need their support?
First of all, before the realities were formed, Hamas participated in forming a new reality, and that is to add pressure on Syria, because Hamas used to give further legitimacy to the axis of resistance and also to Damascus. And they received all sorts of support from Damascus, militarily, intelligence, and also financial. So when they left in 2012, they already created a rift, and they already created or participated in creating the new reality that is preserving today, and that is Hamas ruling the Gaza without support from Syria. Only the support comes from Hezbollah, and Hezbollah intervened in support of its Palestinian brothers. And nowadays, with what's happening in Syria, I see, at least with my subjective eyes, the celebrations are widespread among the Palestinians who support Hamas. So at least you need to have one of the members, part of the axis of resistance, is not loyal to the axis itself. It's loyalty to Qatar and to Turkey, and it's for its ideological upbringing, let's say, which is Muslim Brotherhood ideology. And the second thing is Gaza is destroyed completely. Anyone who says the Palestinians emerged victorious from Gaza, I think that we have to send this person first to Gaza and live there for 2 weeks, and then let us know if this is how victory looks like. Because I'm not underestimating the armed struggle of the Palestinian factions against Israel. I'm talking about the Palestinians. I'm talking about ordinary Palestinians. If they see this as a victory, I think the definitions then of victory is different from what I believe, at least, because I don't
preventing Israel from achieving its goals. That's what they say.
Yes, but
as the resistance grew, you tried to prevent who you're defending.
What was the goal? What was the goal of Israel? Was to commit genocide, right? Or ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. Israel already committed the genocide in Gaza.
It was to get rid of Hamas.
Yes, but now Hamas accepted to rule Gaza in cooperation with the Palestinian Authority. So, and the Palestinian Authority, we all know what is it. It's an Israeli object. So Hamas is now So we have gone back to the era of 2005, 2006, before these clashes between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. And Hamas had to compromise. Hezbollah had to compromise. Hezbollah said that there is no way to decouple the front lines of southern Lebanon with Gaza. And the decoupling happened after the assassinations of the leadership of Hezbollah. Now, if we see objectively what happened in Lebanon, the Hezbollah's war, let's say, attitude or the conduct was way better than of Hamas. Like in terms of how they drained the military, economic, and also demographic strengths of Israel was tremendous from the Hezbollah side. However, at the end of the day, when they accepted on the ceasefire agreement, there were, in my opinion, few things which were very important for Israel. One, to decouple from Gaza, and Hezbollah accepted it. We had entire leadership of Hezbollah is gone, and you're Lebanese. I'm sure you have better contacts in Lebanon, and you're speaking to your people. And from my interaction with the Lebanese who supported Hezbollah, it's quite clear for me that everybody feels like they're orphans, and like they lost the father of this community. And they also feel like it's time for Hezbollah to take only care about their borders and not to engage in a regional, let's say, dynamics, like going to Syria or support the Palestinians in Gaza. It's like they say, "Khalas, we have done what we can. Now we should focus on the local, our borders, our villages. We don't want to go outside. We don't want to intervene or try to protect our allies here and there." So I would also call this as localization of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah has become like a region, as if it's a regional power, going to Iraq, going to Syria, supporting the Yemenis, and then coming for supporting the Palestinians in Gaza. And now Hezbollah has become also, let's say, on a geopolitical level, a smaller player. And Syria is completely gone. Syria is going to be like, this prey which falls on his knees, and everybody has a knife to take a piece. This is what's going to happen to Syria. Syria is finished.
Why do you believe Iran and other members of the Axis of Resistance didn't intervene in Syria before its collapse, for this takeover of Syria?
Actually, I will tell you. I will give you an information which I'm very certain of it. Like, this is an information from Damascus. The foreign minister of Iran, not his last visit to Syria, the one before, when he visited Lebanon and then he came to Syria. And when he arrived to Syria, the Syrians told the Iranian foreign minister that the security situation in Lebanon itself requires active participation and increasing the engagement of Iran, the direct engagement against the axis of America and Israel. And if the Iranians aren't ready to increase their participation, we have to accept a ceasefire agreement, because then the players, Gaza is completely disseminated. Hezbollah has lost its leadership. They have been for 10, 15 days, were in complete chaos, no leadership, no communication, and we don't know what's going to be the destiny of Hezbollah. And therefore, if you don't want to step in as the leading power of the axis of resistance, don't push this any further. This has to be contained and stopped with the current losses. And the Iranians listened to this, and they went to Iran, and they calculated it, and they never done the Operation Promise Tree. And I believe that Operation Promise Tree, if it came as the Iranians were promising that it's going to come, and this time it's going to be different, and it's going to devastate the Zionist state, it's going to stop the genocide, all the developments that followed the assassination of Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria would not have happened, because Iran is the strongest player in this axis of resistance, and it has an excessive military strength and also the capability to project this power on the region in order to deter the Israeli side from accelerating. But once the Israelis accelerated with the assassinations, with the destruction of al-Dahiya, and then they started bombing the civilian neighborhoods in Damascus, I predicted and I said that this attack from al-Jolani will happen, because al-Jolani will prove that he is the leader of the contract army of the US, because the escalatory patterns were too clear for me that Israel will escalate in Syria, because they didn't see any pushback against the escalations that they have done. And Israel is a bold player, especially Netanyahu. If you don't contain him, he will come further. And this is what happened. And when it happened, the attack happened, Syrian side, the Assad, when he flew to Moscow, it seems that this deal was already cooked. And Syria was not really, it was out of the, let's say, discussion. They didn't know about it. Otherwise, logically speaking, it's impossible for the Syrian army to lose, at least from mathematically, in a matter of few days. It's impossible. And there is a famous.
Just put down their arms and just walked away. We were just all watching it happen. They were just sweeping across the country.
But this was a decision. This was a decision made by the higher command of the military to retreat. The army cannot shoot unless there is an order. And since there was the order was the opposite of shooting, then the army puts its weapons down and then retreats. And this is what happened in Hama. This is what happened in Homs, no fighting. And this is what happened in Damascus. Therefore, I truly believe that there was a deal bigger than the size of Syria to resist, and Assad decided to leave. But what I'm trying in all this explanation to say, Iran no longer has an influence in Syria. They have lost it. their major ally in Lebanon, Hezbollah, has been localized, and Gaza has been disseminated, completely destroyed.
Do you believe the
So
reports are true that that al-Jolani asked for relations with Iran with on grounded Islamic principles that they agree on that we've been seeing right now? Have you seen that?
Iranian officials and Iranian press already said that Iran was in touch with HTS through the Qatari intelligence, and they asked from HTS only two things: the protection of the Shia shrines, in especially Sayyidah Zainab in Damascus, and the second one was to protect their embassy. They didn't ask anything else. And
Many of the reports I read, I read a lot about them talking about the resistance against Israel.
no, that's not going to happen. That's a wishful thinking. Sorry. HTS is a CIA contract army, and they will stay like that until the job is done completely. And then you will see that Jolani will be out of the scene. He will no longer be a leading figure in Syria because this is the job that he was tasked to do. And then everybody will forget him and he will disappear like they disappeared before him, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and before him, Osama bin Laden. Nobody will know where his whereabouts. He already finished the job of the US and Israel in Syria, and now it's time to give this to the I would say the puppets, the political puppets, to take over Syria and hold elections and pretend that we have some democratic rule in Syria, where the fact is it's going to be a satellite state or client state for the US, and especially for the regional powers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And what is going to happen? Yesterday, I made a bold prediction and I said, give it between 3 years and 5 years maximum. And you will see the Israeli flag flying over Damascus and the embassy will be open. And Saudis will normalize ties with Israel. Therefore, I don't see it like I'm not an idealist person. I studied political science. I don't want to make wishes. This is the facts that I'm reading, and I see that this is the end of the axis of resistance.
Kevork, let's go back to Iran. When you said the decision they made back in September, October, when you made that prediction, do you believe that this is the influence by the reformists? Because you see that right now there's a lot of talking about, the differences between the reformists and the conservatives, and that's a little strife right now within Iran. Do you believe that played a big role on their decision?
I think that the reformists, since they came to Iran, they have already made it clear that they want to decrease the enrichment of uranium and to restart talks with basically with the West to relieve some of the sanctions. And they have sent signals to the West that they're willing to open channels. When Pezeshkian was in the UN and he gave this famous interview to CNN. Picking CNN itself those are clear messages. The Democrats were always interested in deal with Iran, and the Republicans were always interested in war with Iran. And reading the situation on the map from the reformist side now in Iran, seeing what happened to Gaza and the leadership in Hezbollah, and the Republicans, when they come, there is a deal being cooked between the US, Trump, and Russia. And if they are going to freeze the war in Ukraine or find a settlement in Ukraine, where is going to be the focus of the US? It's going to be on Iran, right? They're not going to fight China. They're not suicidal, but they're going to focus on Iran. And if they focus on Iran, rest assured that with the support of the military-industrial complex completely in the US, all the bankers, and Israel in the region, it's going to be devastating for Iran itself. And Iran, it seems that it has chose the path of compromise with the US at this particular point because the dangers and the odds are too high for Iran, and they don't want to destroy their country. And from a nationalistic point of view, this is what politicians should do, basically. They should protect their own interests. But when you lead an axis and you are the major proponent, major player of this axis, then you also have other responsibilities in this case that you have to preserve. Or you have to be very honest with your partners in this axis of resistance and dissolve it. But keeping the axis of resistance and further encouraging Hezbollah to engage in acts of war with Israel, like happened after October 7, and then withdrawing from it, I think this is going to create lots of mistrust towards Iran from the Lebanese people and the Syrian people. And I think that Iran's project in Syria was very difficult to succeed because Syria is 70% Sunnis. And Iran's project was always seen by the press, by the think tanks, by every talking head. You can see that this is a Shia project. And this is how they portrayed, for example, when Aleppo was liberated first time in 2016, that it fell in the hands of the Shias. This is how they portrayed it. So however, Iran didn't have a way to market its project in Syria.
I want to go back to most of the recent events right now in the last 24 to 48 hours. I think Israel, I read a report this morning that Israel has launched like over 250 strikes in 24 hours in Syria. They've destroyed, as you mentioned, they destroyed their military. So you had mentioned that you believe the next couple of years it's going to be divided and there's going to be different countries occupying different parts of Syria. But do you also believe there's a chance that this might turn into what happened to Iraq and Libya?
Yeah, I think that is the path in Syria because what's going to happen basically, these regional powers, they have already decided which part of Syria is going to be under whose control, basically, and their people will come in positions of power, and they will divide the government into different political spheres, and each power will have its own people in the government, including Israel. I think the future of Syria is going to be there's going to be lots of instability. And I hope I'm wrong. I would be very happy to see Syria stable because I'm not like them, this so-called opposition who wishes the country would fail so that I reach to power. No, I'm not like that. I would be happy to see my people succeed and become stabilized, but I'm not naive enough to believe that tens of thousands of these multinational takfiris now executing people based on sectarian affiliation and killing people now in Damascus for having ties with the government in the past. And now that only today there was an execution in Kafr Sousse in Damascus, I think this will create further instability and violence in the country. And then everybody will come to the conclusion, like in Iraq, okay, you Shias and Alawites stay in here. We Christians go with the Alawites, and then the Druze will have their piece of cake, the Kurds, the Sunnis. It will be like a salad. This is not a nation state. Why the Pan-Arabism was important at its time? Because it was able to unite the people in having one, let's say, superior identity. And now this is not going. It's not like I'm a supporter of it. I'm just saying it was able to unite some of these groups together. It's not going to be the case. There is no Syrian identity any longer. Like the so-called insurgents. If you ask any one of them now, do they say I'm a Syrian, or do they say I'm an Islamist and I want to establish an Islamic state? So there's going to be huge confrontations and struggles in the country itself, and the people will come to the realization that it's difficult to live among this type of people who have a mentality of superior mentality, basically, like the Israelis do, like the Zionists have this superiority on the Arabs, and these Islamists think that they are superior to others, and they have guns, and they have the military now, they have everything. How do you expect for the people to push against it? It's very difficult. So yeah, I think the future will look like Iraq.
How likely do you believe that this happens? This spills over into Lebanon and then goes to Iran as well. Do you believe this would happen?
I'm very sure that this is going to have its look. There is a saying: if Syria sneezes, Lebanon gets cold, my friend. If Syria sneezes, Lebanon gets cold. So like. Our countries were divided. Yes, Lebanon has its unique culture, let's say, position, and its unique position and unique. Some of the communities are unique for Lebanon, but this was an extension of Syria, and expecting Syria to be divided and Lebanon to stay healthy, it's unreasonable. The same way when Iraq was divided into different lines, we expected it to come to Syria. The sectarian tensions, and now Syria, after 20 years of the occupation of Iraq, it turned out into another Iraq, right? So this stuff always have its repercussions on neighboring countries, because our countries are artificially divided. You cannot really come and say the people living on the border exactly between Lebanon, on the Lebanese side are not the same people who live just on the other side of the border, because there is just one border between them, and this were one families. And like the people who will pay the most, in my opinion, in this case, if Syria is divided, are going to be the Christians of Lebanon. Therefore, I expect that for the next period for Christian nationalism to grow, like this right-wing, let's say, Christian groups will be grown in strength, and Trump will be the perfect candidate for them to give them this support, because Trump likes to spread Christian Zionism in our region to pave the way for all the people to accept Israel. And this is something that they failed to do with the Christians of the region and the indigenous Christians of the region. Like you cannot, like let's say this is under Assad, right? Just an argument's sake. And you're trying to open channels with the Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church in Syria to normalize ties with Israel or be supportive of this, right? They will reject it vehemently. But if you ethnically cleanse the Christians from Syria, which is the case, in Iraq, 90% are gone, and in Syria, probably 80% are gone. And when they become too weak, and then when the US and Israel present themselves as the savior of these people from the savages of HDS, then they will be seen as protectors of the Christians, and they will accept even the indoctrination of Christian Zionism, because then when there is an existential threat against you, you would prefer the shaitan, right, to anyone, basically, to save you or your child or your. This is how they play these games. It's a really multifaceted and it's really complicated, but it's not difficult to see it. If you take a zoom out and see what they do to the region,
Connect the dots. You could just connect the dots.
yeah, and what really like why I'm hurt for the past 2 weeks. It's not because Assad is gone. And now I was the one who took one of the, like, there were so many people who were considered Assadists like myself. I was the first one to come and criticize him. And for me, he was the, it's not about the person himself, it's about the position, which was important to preserve the unity of Syria. And people didn't understand that. But what really saddens me is that the people of the region, my friend, you give them a book, you open the book, and it's written like from A to Z, all the historical experiences, not long time ago, it's just like the past 10 to 20 years. And you have everything to understand what happened in the region, but they fall in the same mistake over and over again. Like Syrians do not learn from Iraq, and Lebanese do not learn from Syria, and the Syrians do not learn from Lebanon. You know, like it's like we have to.
It's the same cycle.
Everybody.
Same cycle.
Yeah, it's like we have to fall in the same mistake over and over again in order to learn from it, and then 2-3 generations later, the people forget again what happened 3 generations ago, and we repeat. So history doesn't repeat itself. The people do not learn, and this is the reason why I'm saddened and upset, because now I feel really powerless, because all the talk and all the work that I did in the past, it was to avoid this scenario. And when it happened, I felt like, no, I didn't feel like my work has gone in vain, but I felt like I'm an orphan now. This cause that I defended so fiercely to keep Syria united, it's gone. And now I have to adapt in a situation which I was like afraid that this is going to happen.
You said, it's actually a nice line, when Syria sneezes, Lebanon gets the cold. And Said Hassan Nasrallah was saying, if Syria falls, Palestine is gone. So what do you believe is going to happen to the Palestinian struggle for self-determination now?
I don't think that there are much of obstacles now against the Israelis. And the rest is in the West Bank. They are going to chop them slowly. Like they will build more settlements. They will push what basically neighboring countries do and Europeans do. They give student visas quicker to the Palestinians, resettlement quicker to the Palestinians. It's just like what they did with the Christians in Syria. When you are from Syria and you were displaced to Lebanon and you're a Christian and you apply for NGOs and they resettle you to Canada, resettle you to the US or Australia very quickly. But that was deliberate and it was targeted. And I think they could do the same thing. We have lots of Palestinians here, for example, in Germany. There are stateless, but they have the right to stay here until like 5 years you work and then you get a German passport. I mean, it's gone, you know, you will be assimilated here in a 1 generation or 2. This is how they think. Because I know for sure when the onslaught started against Gaza, European countries were discussing quotas, how many Palestinians are going to receive behind closed doors. Because they want to help Israel in the ethnic cleansing. But they have to find a better PR, you know, like it's all about the cosmetics for them. They don't want to sound like they are doing something wrong for the Palestinians. They want to show to the world that they're doing the humane thing to the people.
That leads me to the next question that I was going to ask you. And we'll end it with this. What do you believe we should expect in the next few months in Syria?
You could expect like what Morsi did in Egypt. They first take over the education system. They take over Wizard al-Awqaf, which is the ministry responsible for the religious affairs. And they take over the tourism sector. Those are the 3. It's more important for them than the finance, than the prime minister, than the foreign ministry. It's so important for them, education, because this is where indoctrination of the children comes. And you will definitely install a conservative, let's say, indoctrination for the children, a more religious affiliated. You will take over the tourism and turn it into religious tourism in Syria, like they tried to do in Egypt. So don't expect anything but soft penetration of the state institutions and try to Islamize it from within until the time comes they have a full control. And people telling me that the Muslim Brotherhood tried to do this in Egypt and they failed, and because there was another revolution against them. And I want to tell something to these people. It was the Egyptian army which ousted Hosni Mubarak, and it was the Egyptian army which ousted Morsi after 2 or 3 years. Yes, there were people demonstrating, but this was on the surface, it's important, but who took them down were the military. And in Egypt, you have a deep state represented by the military. So whoever comes and goes, there are certain headlines that you cannot really cross. And once you do, the military comes and removes you. And there are agreements between the US and the Egyptian military to keep the country's certain posture intact. In Syria, we don't have a military any longer. And we don't have a deep state. Under even Assad, we didn't have a deep state. The deep state was Assad. Everything was him. Now, when he's gone, and with Israel destroying all Syria's strategic stockpile and weapons and research centers and ports and this and that, navy, Syria doesn't have any power which can correct course when HTS take over the entire state institutions, unless regional countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey force them to do, which I don't think that they will do it or have any interest in doing it anyway.
Well, Kevork,
I know it's bleak. I know it's bleak, but you know me, brother. I'm so honest with you. You know,
there's a reason why I asked to interview you. I've really enjoyed watching you over the last decade. I followed your YouTube channel, and you have a very unique perspective. You're straight to the point. And, I really, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us here at TMJ News. I guess all we could do is just pray for the best.
Thank you so much. I also pray for the best for the Syrian people. And I already wrote a long post and I promised everyone, like, I'm not going to be someone who is trying to find obstacles for the development of Syria, but I'm going to be very honest. I don't see the future is bright for the moment.
Maybe I saw that post you wrote.
Yeah, maybe things would change. Maybe things would change. Yeah, maybe things would change, but I'm not a jerk to come and ask for sanctions or try to destabilize the country in any way or shape. my affiliation is to Syria, and if the Syrians are happy, I'm happy. But maybe they have to go through this experience and grow and mature. Maybe, I don't know. Let's see how this will end.
Well, Kevork, thank you so much. I had a great time with
Thank
you.
you, Habib. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this latest episode. If you like what you see here on TMJ News, please like and share this video, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more content.